Hi there, and a warm welcome to the launch of the Circularity Gap Report 2022. We're broadcasting live from the studio here at Circle, the circular platform of ABN AMRO, and we're so happy that you're all with us, to have you here with us today. My name is Lynn Zebeda, and I'll be moderating the conversations today. And it's very important and very crucial conversations that we're going to have, because circular economy thinking helps us with solutions that can help mitigate the climate breakdown that we're all thinking about. It helps us to safeguard our finite natural resources and also can help us build a more equitable, more just society. And with more than 91% of all the materials that we extract being lost, being wasted, we truly have a gigantic opportunity to do better. And today we're taking stock after 5 years of circularity gap reporting. And the big overarching question for today is, how will we together unleash the power of that circular economy that we're all striving for? Well, we're going to do this in 3 parts. And in the first, we're going to get right down to action. What do we need to do? What are the big levers for change that the team that wrote this report have identified with so many thinkers around them? In the second part, we'll reflect on how will we actually get there, and we'll do that with 2 absolute titans in the field. I'll introduce you to them when the time is right, but I'm impressed that they're here with us. And third and last, we're going to have a very crucial part of the conversation, which is, what are the barriers we actually face? We kind of know, we've known for a while that we need to change our ways, but we haven't, or not to the extent necessary. So what are those obstacles that we face? And especially, how do we overcome them? How can we do better? So it's big topics, it's big conversations, but we also have big thinkers with us today that can help us ahead in the next steps. And we're going to start with some of the authors of this report that I have with me here at the table. So our first part, indeed, what do we need to do to reach a circular economy? As I said, the reporting initiative was started 5 years ago, and these reports really offer insights for all of us, but also for decision makers, from businesses, from governments, from cities, to really understand where we stand and what we need to do. And I have here with us 3 people actually who have contributed majorly, who have actually written it. We have here Lakshmi Haig. You're the lead of editorial at Circle Economy. Mm-hmm. So happy that you're here with us today.
So happy to be here.
Nice. Thanks for that. We have Mark de Wit. Mark, you actually initiated the whole circularity reporting, gap reporting.
That's right. Yeah, really excited to finally celebrate this 5-year anniversary.
5-year mark. It's quite a milestone.
It is. Yeah. It is. And yeah, I mean, thinking about 5 years ago and where we've traveled over all those years, I mean, we've now been in the business for 10 years to really help businesses, cities, and nations to become really practical about what it is, what the circular economy can deliver. But really what we also saw about 5 years ago was that many critical questions were unanswered. Yeah. And one in particular that stood out for us was how circular is our global economy currently? Exactly. Because if we don't know that, how can we move forward? So that was the first question, and we really started to dive deep with emerging scientific studies back in the days, and we created an overview of where we feel we stand. And we condensed that on 1 page that we call an X-ray of our global economy, where we really look what are all the materials that we use as 7.7 billion people on this planet. How does that all flow? But also the ultimate goals of the whole report has not changed. So we want to take stock of where do we stand in terms of circularity, how can we measure progress, but also how can we move to action? So how can we create an action plan for the global economy? That has been our goals, but really kind of in a world with a lot of information, we thought we want to have a very dense and compact style report with really intuitive visuals, with bold headlines, really to invite a very broad audience to take stock, learn the nuances, learn the complexity beyond those top lines. So that really has been our ambition ever since. Yeah. But also kind of advance key topics. How does circularity relate to climate change? How does everything we already have in our economy, the stocks, relate to things we extract and that flow through our economy? Exactly. So those kind of were big questions. crucially to see how can we use this as a means to adjust society.
Exactly. Yeah, it gives a fantastic overview of so many topics that come together in that circular economy thinking. You say the big headlines. What would you say is the big headline for this latest report?
Well, I think the big headline, we always try to condense it. The first one was our economy is 9.1% circular. Then we saw that we're actually, that our engine is stuck in reverse. That we can fix the climate if we fix our economy.
Yeah.
So those were some bold headlines, and I think Lakshmi will come to kind of some of the key headlines of this one.
Of this one, yeah.
But maybe if I can point out one thing, and that is really that apart from the reports, what we've also done is we've built an amazing group of what I called critical friends. So really people from business, from government, from academia, from NGOs, that have helped us identify key topics we wanted to entertain, drive the narratives, but most importantly also amplify the messaging, because we need these messages to go out. And lastly, I mean, this is an amazing effort always as a team at Circle Economy with all my dear colleagues, where everyone rallies together to get these messages out.
Yeah, beautiful work, really, for the team. And as you say, you have critical friends around you, but also not just any friends. Earlier this week, I saw this speech of Frans Timmermans, the Vice President of the European Commission, actually mentioning the report in his speech. And what we need to do is kind of New Year's speech for everyone. So this report is really taking you places, going to high places. Where do you hope it will take you? Well,
where I think it has taken us, almost out of necessity because of COVID. We used to launch this at Davos three times. And although that was great to kind of set and help shape the global agenda with all of these thought leaders, what I really like of today, and actually also of last year, that we have so many people from across the globe tuning in, able to exchange thoughts on this. So making this much more kind of inclusive, and really my hope is that it lands on the desk, but that we can keep on exchanging and working with people from all walks of life, from all parts of the globe, to really make it practical. Because end of day, that's what's needed.
Really translating into policy and practice. Exactly. Thank you, Mark, for now. You're here with us for the next hour, so feel welcome to be a part of this conversation, of course, as an initiator of this whole entire thing. I want to go to your colleague, Lakshmi. Yeah, you've done a lot of the writing or bringing together all the different insights in the report as well. And maybe we can just start with, like, where are we now? We know that there's a lot of virgin materials being pumped through our economic system year after year. But can you give us a little bit of a feel of the magnitude of that?
Sure. Well, I think before kind of diving into these big numbers that we catapult out into the discussion, as Mark mentioned, I'd love to also think about that context that we're operating in now and how it's different, quite different to 5 years ago. Because if you look at even in policy plans, the circular economy is really featuring a lot more, multilateral level, national, local. Also for businesses, we see it being used more and more as a way to align climate and kind of commercial goals. Yeah. So I think that's really something worth noting before we move on to the more sobering numbers that can be a bit bleak, although they're needed to kind of energize us to also make the changes that are needed. So to get there, let's go back to the Paris Agreement. That was COP21 in 2015. Yep. The Paris Agreement is very well known because, of course, it was nearly every country in the world that signed up to limiting global warming temperatures to 1.5 degrees. So amazing moment, right? And everyone's kind of galvanized to make a change. But we've discovered, and that's what we report in the new report, that since that event in Paris in 2015, the global economy has actually extracted more than 500 billion tons of virgin materials.
More than 500 billion tons of virgin materials we've extracted from the earth.
Yes, and like you said, the magnitude of that is very hard to comprehend. It's just absolutely massive. But I think what it really points to is, on the one hand, we have action, we have mobility, but then on the other hand, we have business as usual chugging along, and this kind of normalization, or the fact that maybe we're even desensitized a lot of the time at how polluting how unsustainable and how unjust, wildly unjust the system is.
Yeah.
I mean, we throw away perfectly edible food while people around the world don't have enough to eat.
Exactly.
Unnamed multinationals burn huge amounts of stock that could be resold, but under their current accounting processes, it's cheaper to just burn it.
Yeah.
I mean, these things, it just shows that it's not fit for purpose, the way we're living right now and the way the global economy is operating. So
yeah.
it's really time for something fresh.
Yeah, something fresh indeed.
Yeah.
I think one thing I read in the report that was really kind of a visual that we have, that the stuff that we have on Earth now outweighs the biomass. So biomass isn't the oceans, the trees, the everything, the living beings. We have more stuff in weight than life, let's say.
There was not a great
pretty
threshold.
Staggering, yeah. Exactly. And but indeed, you say we need something fresh. So let's just like switch to the fresh. Yeah. The 21 solutions. I want to talk about that. In the report, you find several really beautiful graphics, and one of them is this vortex that you will see, which is one way of portraying 21 different solutions in key sectors that will help us become more circular and thereby more, climate-proof as well. And I want to ask you, Lakshmi, one thing about these solutions that's really important to think is that they go beyond just the energy transition that we're always talking about. But can you maybe sketch for us, like, what value do these solutions really offer? And maybe how were they created? How did you come up with them?
Well, I mean, of course, they are all circular solutions. And I think in all our reports, we really posit that the circular economy is a way to fulfill global needs, but within planetary boundaries, which are now mostly being overshot. So in that way, we really had to make it tangible as well. So how do you make the circular economy, this big abstract idea that we're saying is such a strong lever, how do you make it tangible and applicable? So what we've done in most of our reports is take key societal needs, so things that we really need to fulfill our lives. So getting from A to B with transport, nutrition, having a roof over our head in housing. Yeah. And nearly every report has looked at how materials, resources, flow through the economy and feed into these needs. And quite clearly, under the linear system, there are too many resources going in and too many emissions coming out. Yep. It's wasteful and, as we just said, unsustainable. So with that knowledge, we were able to craft, the research team, were able to craft future-looking scenarios that are based on the circular economy, and if implemented across our key societal needs, the needs will be fulfilled, so people will be able to thrive and be healthy, be happy. But the Earth, our planetary boundaries, will also be safer and respected. Yeah. And an important thing that you mentioned about the energy transition, these are actually, so in our calculation, they would have to happen alongside the current clean energy transition. So that is also very important, but we're saying that unless you also adopt circular strategies into reaching the 1.5 goal, you won't actually get there. But if you do both, you may well get there. Exactly. Can you highlight maybe one or two that we're not generally thinking about as important solutions? Yeah, I mean, to maybe simplify it a bit, we base our circular solutions on 4 key principles. Yeah. So number 1, potentially the most important, using fewer resources. And that's basically cutting excess consumption when you can. Exactly. Some simple things like not eating too much in certain parts of the world, reducing mobility when it is possible. Secondly, the second solution would be using resources for longer. Yeah. So that's making things more durable, expanding the lifetime of the resources that we do use. Thirdly would be using resources again, the more typical recycling that people often equate with a circular economy. And lastly would be regenerating our materials. So not just phasing out, but really getting rid of fossil fuels and also not using pollutants or toxins when possible as well. Right, okay, so that's kind of the general basis of... Yeah. And please read the report. The 21 solutions are all in there. And I think everyone in every sector can kind of also pick and choose from it what's relevant for me, what can I be contributing to. I think there's truly something for everybody in there. Maybe just very briefly, because you just said it yourself. The system we have right now is just so unjust, right? Like, it's not okay the way things are organized in terms of who gets what, let's say. But I think when we talk about the circular economy, we often think about it as like a greenifying, like less stuff indeed. But can you say, what do you find important to say about this equity dimension, this social justice dimension of the circular economy? Yeah, I think there's a lot to say because it's maybe a criticism sometimes lodged against the circular economy that it's not thought about enough. So you do have to actively apply that social lens.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different examples I could use, but one could be the jobs angle of things. For example, if we were to have a global circular economy, it's a huge opportunity for employment. So a lot of jobs will be created. Yeah. Some jobs that we currently have will be a bit different. But some jobs may well be slightly phased out.
Yeah.
But it's really important that that's prepared for, so that in the circular economy we can deliver jobs that are decent, that are inclusive.
Exactly.
And if it's not prepared for that, if that social side isn't thought about, then we really risk making the same mistakes as a linear economy. So, lower working standards and so many of the things we see happening today.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna actually go. We have another third colleague hidden somewhere in the studio here. His name is Matthew Fraser, and he's actually the lead of the Circularity Gap Reporting Initiative at Circle. And he is going to tell us a little bit about his experience, or Circle's experience, working with countries, the key insights from that, and the future of the initiative as he sees it. Matthew, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Lynn. I'd be more than happy to share some reflections on our work with nations over the past few years, but also some thoughts forward about how we're using those learnings in shaping our strategy for the Circularity Gap Reporting Initiative. Over the past 5 years, we've worked with a variety of front-running organizations from almost about 10 different nations now, so quite a group of people. And these organizations are really on the ground, really pushing change in the political arena and the business arena, and we're very, very happy to help them put circular economy on the map. Obviously, our GAP report is quite instrumental in establishing that benchmark for circularity. But I think beyond that, looking at the effort that we all take to bring the right stakeholders around the table, from the business community to scientific experts, statistical bureaus, it's a big effort in terms of bringing this data together in novel ways, also in terms of aligning on the insights that we're getting from these reports and how we can really shape those recommendations in the right way to accelerate the circular economy within that local context. So a huge amount of great work. And I think what we've seen is when we combine our efforts like this, the impact of our work is tremendous. We've seen a huge spike in interest in our results every time our reports are published. What that translates to is to a lot of news media coverage, television, print media, online. In a handful of cases, our reports have even been debated or brought for discussion on the House of Parliament, in the case of the Netherlands and in Norway. We've also had a handful of really great endorsements from several ministers from governments. So a lot of traction. And I think one of the learnings that I've seen is it's really created a sense of urgency for how do we track these metrics over the long term? How do we set targets for improvement? And actually, how do we consistently bring together data in ways that we can track our progress toward the circular economy? I'm very proud of our collaboration with these nations, and I think we've learned a lot from them. However, what does this mean going forward? We have a big global ambition of doubling circularity within 10 years. As my colleagues just said, we're actually moving backwards on that target, so there's quite a challenge ahead. Looking toward the future, we really need global adoption of circular economy solutions now. In order to achieve that scale, we really need to embrace digital solutions so that all nations on Earth can not only track their circularity, but begin to identify those insights. I think also looking back at the experience that we've had with our existing CGR nations, I can imagine that nations really need kind of basic transparency into at least 3 things. One is circularity metrics themselves, again, not only for benchmarking, but actually for consistent and harmonized year-on-year monitoring of performance. Also, good data-driven evidence on the benefits, the impacts from an environmental, from a social, and also an economic point of view on what circular economy can actually generate for each nation. Finally, also the ability to consistently identify hotspots, identify problem areas within an economy, and actually steer the focus toward these challenges and generate credible and scalable solutions. So to achieve global impact and global scale, the Circularity Gap Reporting Initiative really needs to embrace digital. I'm very happy to announce that over the past 5 months, we've been working with 4 front-running organizations actually to co-create our first digital product together. These organizations are Zero Waste Scotland, the Oman Environmental Services Holding Company, Circular Norway, and ARA from Austria. These nations have worked with us quite intensively to co-create the key features of the tool, the shape, the look and feel, and also the essential value that it creates. And it's been an immense learning experience that I'm very proud of and very happy of. And for the first time, I'm actually very happy to share with you a bit of a broader vision of what this digital product could look like. So very happy for you to watch the video.
GMATE Nations, which is co-created with 4 organizations, is a digital product that brings together the best data, knowledge, and insights to help nations accelerate their transition to a circular economy. GMATE Nations is built on 3 key pillars: explore, scan, and act. A circular economy can contribute to many environmental and social goals, from net zero to social equality. GMATE Nations lets you explore how your nation is performing on these goals and where circular economy approaches can help. What we see today is that no nation on Earth is fully meeting the needs of its population while operating within the means of the planet. Each nation has its own unique challenges, but many share a common set of opportunities. GMATE Nations shows you how your nation is performing in relation to your peers and helps you identify what circular economy approaches can be utilized to achieve your goals. Drawing on robust data sets and methodologies, GMATE Nations lets you scan your country to benchmark and monitor your progress towards a circular economy. GMATE Nations uses official statistics to build a dashboard of metrics relevant to your nation. In addition to reporting on material circularity, we include metrics that measure the environmental and social dimensions of the circular economy. One of the crucial metrics is our Circular Jobs metric, which was developed in partnership with the United Nations Environment Programme. Metrics like this can help policymakers and labor organizations to design evidence-based strategies based on which sectors have the most current circular activity and potential. Once you know how your country is performing, translating insights into action is crucial. GMATE leverages specialized tools that you can use to take action, whether you are representing a city, a business, or a nation. Using the Knowledge Hub, discover the right circular economy strategies with a repository of over 3,000 case studies. Using GMATE Cities, find tangible solutions that can be implemented and scaled at a city level. Using the Circle Assessment tool, evaluate your progress on key circular strategies and discover opportunities to make your business more circular. From insights to action, GMATE Nations helps your country accelerate its transition to a circular economy. To learn how we can help your country take the next step, visit www.circularity-gap.world.
Great, from report to actual action indeed. Okay, we're wrapping up this first part about the report itself, and maybe we can try to summarize it here. So one thing is that in the last 6 years, you said 500 billion tons of virgin, as in newly extracted materials, have been pumped into our economic system, meaning we have more stuff, materials, than life in weight on our planet. Circularity has actually dropped. It was around 9%, and now it's around 8.6%, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So we're not really learning our lesson here. You have come up with this beautiful overview of 21 solutions for different sectors, from housing to mobility to food and other sectors that could really help deal with this issue and also deal with the climate breakdown that is truly on everyone's mind. Also because 70% of emissions is caused by this material handling, right? It's not just, it doesn't come out of nowhere. And then lastly, the GMATE Nations. And your colleague Laura explained to me that GMATE is a Japanese term for like, we know it's hard, it's complex, but let's do it anyway. Let's take action, right? That's what it stands for. Did I cover the most important things, you think? Or anything to add of what you really want people to remember?
I think you covered it greatly, yeah?
Okay.
I think let's go to maybe our titans, as you call
Our
them.
titans, yes. Okay, let's do it. Indeed, our second part about we know what we need to do, but how are we going to do it? How do we get there? And indeed, as I said, and I'm definitely not exaggerating here when I say there's two titans joining the conversation. I'll quickly say who they are. The first one is Anders Wijkman. You might know him as the honorary president of the Club of Rome, or as the chair of Climate Kick, or as a former member of the Swedish Parliament, or as an even former UN Assistant Secretary General, or an author. He writes a lot now, and he will be joining the conversation. And secondly, we have Walter Stahl. I think they're longtime friends as well. Walter is the founder and director at the Product Life Institute in Geneva. And he's actually the founding father of this whole idea of circular economy. He invented the term economy in loop. So we'll hear him speak. But I would like to start with you, Mr. Wijkman. Or I can say Anders, we agreed, right?
Of course.
Of course, great.
You're more than willing.
Okay.
Ready to do that, yeah.
Thank you, Anders. Welcome to this conversation. Very happy that you're joining us with all your experience and insights. So I wanted to ask you, you've listened to the presentations of findings, you were sent the report as well. But from your experience, what do you agree with as truly crucial solutions or crucial levers for change that we all need to be pulling? If we want to reach a circular economy, of course.
The report contains a lot, and I think the most important thing is that it focuses attention on and on again on the fact that we are still very linear, and gives a lot of examples of that. And I mean, we need to reach out to a lot of people, in particular to decision makers, to make them understand this. What I find very attractive in this report is this attempt to analyze how our needs, our human needs, can be met in a more intelligent and less wasteful way. So the 21 examples of consumption patterns and how needs can be met, I think is a very good step in the right direction. Because I believe there are too many people who tend to think that to solve the climate problem and also ecosystem decline, the only thing we have to do is to develop green technologies. And then we can continue as before. And that's simply not true. We are already using too much. We are extracting too much materials from Mother Earth. And we have to do things in a more intelligent way. So it's both a question of new technology, but also changed behavior patterns and being sufficient with lifestyles that are less wasteful. And I think that to me is the most important thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I've just described some of the positions that you've been in, influencing these topics that we're talking about in different sectors. And if you say, like, we need to get to a more intelligent use of what we have, we need to change behavioral patterns to not focus on efficiency, but rather sufficiency. Like, enough is enough. We can live with enough.
And I would say not only efficiency and sufficient, effectiveness to do the right things.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty with the English language, that they have so many synonyms for different aspects.
Slightly different words. Yeah.
But let me give you an example. I mean, in cities, mobility in cities is dominated by private cars. And these cars stand idle for 95% of the time. It's a very wasteful way of using resources.
Yeah.
I mean, just imagine all the efforts behind building or constructing the car, producing the car, and all the emissions and all the materials going into it. And then we use it so relatively seldom. Of course, you can organize mobility in a more smart way. So that's just one example, but it's a very good example.
Yeah, exactly.
So mobility as a service is one of the topics that you raise in this report, and I think it's a perfect example.
Exactly. But Anders, and I am really kind of burning to ask you, if you talk about these, behavioral big changes that we need to make, what key insights do you have from all your experience on how do we make that happen? How do we really look at ourselves and think oh, wait, we can do this differently?
Well, the individual can only do a certain part of it.
Yeah.
The system we live in is very much deciding how things are being done. And as an example, if virgin materials are less expensive than reused and secondary materials, this linear system will continue. And the fact is that in most cases, virgin materials are too cheap.
Yeah.
So we should put a tax on the use of nature. It has been for free for too long.
Exactly.
It worked when the economy was small and when we were relatively few people, but it doesn't work any longer.
Yeah.
So we are overusing the system and in a very inefficient way. So that to me is a very critical aspect of it. But then, of course, as a consumer, I have to rethink what I do.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at how we treat food. When I was a boy, it was impossible to throw away food. Today, I'm sorry to say, my grandchildren, they threw away a lot of food.
A lot of food, exactly.
And I don't know what to do about it. So there are so many aspects on this.
Yeah.
But I think the structure of the economy and the sort of policy framework within which we are living is very, very important.
Yeah.
And fortunately, the European Commission seems to understand that because they are moving in the right direction.
Yeah. Thank you for now, Anders. Let's bring in Walter as well. Walter Stahl. As I said, he's the director and founder of the Product Life Institute in Geneva. He's been working on this for literally decades. He coined the term circular economy, the economy in loops. Welcome, Walter. So nice to have you here.
You have to unmute.
Oh, you're still muted, it seems.
Yes, okay.
Yes, yeah, great. So, Walter, I want to ask you, because you've also read the report, sent a long list of thoughts back, I heard when you read it. But I want to ask you also because you've been practicing this for a really long time now. So what have you seen in terms of solutions that really stand out in terms of getting us ahead towards achieving circularity? Maybe an example, be it on business or city or country level.
Thank you, Lynn, for giving me a chance to talk.
Of course.
The report has whetted my appetite, but left me hungry on several issues. Topic 1, the report compares in only 6 years the global economy consumed an additional 500 billion tons of virgin materials, but only 8.6% made it back into our economy, which probably means into our production. And this, to me, gives a yes, but reaction. The dissipative uses of materials, such as fossil fuels, wear and tear elements, and biomass, never will come back. They end up in the environment. So you can't include it in the circularity. What happened to the other 90%? Consumption or investment of minerals and ores. Take hydroelectric dams with a lifespan of over 100 years, or Roman aqueducts. They live forever, or stones are reused or repurposed. They never actually join the circularity. The second topic is the Circular Gap report mixes apples with infrastructure. Apples I call the products of the shower economy, biocycles. Water, agricultural produce, and energy are based on throughput. You can measure input and you can measure output, but fossil fuels go up in smoke. Biomass could be eaten or used in construction, timber. And the opposite, infrastructure, the bathtub economy of tech cycles. Infrastructure, buildings, equipment, objects. The key information for stock management is not the quantity that goes into the bathtub or the quantity that comes out, but it's the quantity and quality of the water in the bathtub. This applies to minerals and ores. And we have no clue, we don't know what this data is of inside the bathtub. The objective of the circular economy has always been to manage stocks, the value and utility of objects, and the value and purity of materials, which creates resilience and redundancy. But the precondition is the existence of natural, human, cultural, and manufactured capitals, and the culture of caring and essential services to maintain the value of these capitals. And this is very different from region to another region. Topic 3, the regional context needs a higher granularity of data. In what the report calls shift regions, the circular economy is a key, maybe even the only, strategy to achieve a low waste, low carbon, low anthropogenic mass society in industrialized countries with societies of abundance. They can create a bathtub economy, but what the report calls build regions. They first have to create stocks of infrastructure and objects to respond to the basic physiological and safety needs of their population, such as shelter and food. But even then, take Indonesia. Indonesia will build a new capital city on Borneo to escape the natural disasters in Jakarta. Grow countries are a mix of shift and build regions. So social justice means a global solidarity between regions. But next topic, we have to distinguish between needs and wants. Among the largest resource and carbon footprint topics in your report are housing, nutrition, and healthcare. These are basic needs. Mobility is clearly a want, and it's linked to town planning and globalization. Before 1910, mobility in the Northern Hemisphere was mainly provided by ships, walking, horses, and bicycles. Later, railways. In future, an intelligent decentralization of economic activities could greatly reduce the need for mobility as in the present.
Yeah, thank you, Walter. Thank you for this overview you're giving us. You didn't really answer my question, but that's very okay. Actually, this is better. Because I think you're raising a couple of very important points here. And what really resonates with me as well is this culture of caring that's kind of underlying all of this. And this careful, in that culture of caring, carefully considering what do we need versus what do we just want. And that... and I think I wanted to pause here because I want to bring in a third guest that can really reflect well on what you were raising about the regional context and the basic needs. I learned a lot from you just now in a few minutes already, Walter, so thank you for that. But we wanted to get to this point where we really reflect on the obstacles, because indeed, many of you know about the Limits to Growth report written by the Club of Rome, of which Anders is the honorary president. This report, it's been 50 years. This year, it's 50 years. It was written in 1972. How many of us were born in 1972, guys? None of us. But we've been saying this for a while now, and yet we don't see a lot of change. So there must be very big obstacles, barriers for us to actually get there, do what we know we need to do. And we have here with us Elisa Tonda. And Elisa is the head of Consumption and Production, the Consumption and Production Unit at UN Environment's Economy division. Elisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and good day to everybody. Thanks, Lina.
Hey, welcome. So Elisa, I really wanted to bring you in at this point because you work with national governments through national action plans. You work with businesses, small businesses, multinational businesses, on making their change more sustainable, on reporting better. So all in all, you have a lot of experience in practice, right? So I want to know really from that practice point of view, what do you see as major obstacles that stop us from reaching a circular economy? And on the other side, what actually works?
Thank you, Lynn. And what I'm going to share with you is not exclusively my perspective, but what we have heard in the last couple of years, where we have been able to really get a sense from governments in the countries, but also businesses, financial institutions, civil society organizations that are all thriving towards moving towards more sustainability in the way in which we consume and produce, and circular economy being one of the instruments to get there. So where they see the barrier, the challenges that are currently in front of them, and where do they see already these being addressed? Lynn, you said in commenting the findings of the report, and the experts that have preceded me echoed the fact that we're actually far from being where we would like to be in terms of circularity and in terms of sustainable consumption and production. And what we see working well are actually probably more the exception than the normal. But when we look at policy intervention and how circular economy and sustainable consumption and production has been framed in policies, we frequently are confronted with very sectoral or standalone initiatives. And we fail to see these as being fully integrated, fully taken on board by different ministries, different authorities in the government. And when referring to the 21 actions that are reflected in the report, it's really very evident that this is not the agenda of one specific authority in the government, but it really requires a coordinated effort.
Yeah.
Lynn, what we have also seen is at time that when those policies and instruments are there, they are frequently a good framework, but that lacks implementation and that lacks monitoring. So it's also difficult to say which are the instruments that have been functioning well and which are the instruments that prove to be slightly less successful. And Lynn, if I may, I'll just put on the table a couple of ideas prior to giving it back to you vis-a-vis the policy dimension. One being that for many countries, the idea of circularity is still somehow very closely connected to the end of life of a product, a waste equation, a recycling equation. And it is still a challenge to bring it to the level in which it really influences products and sectors at the design level. And we are also seeing still quite a use of voluntary commitment, voluntary approaches to handle this agenda, rather than having other stronger policy instrument. But Lynn, let me give it back to you.
Thank you for sketching that out, Elisa. I do actually...
Can I make a comment there?
That's exactly what I wanted to suggest.
Yeah, because I very much agree with the need for an integrated approach. In my country, Sweden, the Environment Ministry has been responsible for what we call the circular economy, to move towards it. But the Environment Ministry can only do so much. Unless they have cooperation from all the other ministries, it's going to be very, very limited. And as you said, it will end up with, trying to organize waste management a bit more effective. And that's just a tiny bit of the problematic. Because as Walter said, the most important thing is to keep materials in use as long as possible and to maintain them, to repair them, to recondition them, etc. So recycling comes very much at the end of the process. And yet recycling seems to be what people automatically think of when we talk about the circularity. So I think you're very right, an integrated approach, and we have to start upstream. Design of the product is very important. And you know, I've talked to the design community, and until recently they said, nobody really asked us that the product should be sustainable or circular in its design. We were asked to do functional things, elegant things, glossy things, not sustainable or circular things.
Yeah.
So, and I think they are very much interested, but they've not been asked.
Yeah, good point, Anders. And I also do want to ask you more broadly, as we're kind of making an inventory here of these major obstacles. One is indeed coordinated efforts, as Elisa just sketched out. What do you see? And I'm going to ask you to keep it short. I'm going to ask both you, Anders, and Walter, what do you see as a major structural obstacle to achieving that circular economy? And if you can enlighten us about how you think we can overcome it.
I think the cost structure is the number one thing.
Yeah.
And as I said before, as long as virgin materials are less expensive than secondary materials, there is very little to talk about when it comes to secondary materials market. There is waste management, yes, and most of it goes into incineration or is being dumped. But there is very limited fractions that really are reused and reconditioned. So I think the cost structure is the main issue to me.
Yeah. Okay. So you say price it differently is the way to overcome it. Tax virgin materials more and find a way to make the market for secondary materials more attractive. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Walter, you've been thinking about this for a while, about this economy in loops and the obstacles we face in reaching it. So can you maybe enlighten us, like, what do you feel is like a major obstacle that we need to tackle?
Unmute.
Yes. Thanks, Anders.
Thank you, Anders. The key issue is we have to learn the lessons for the future. And the lessons of the past are very clear. Avoid resource-intensive technologies and avoid monocultures. But look what's happening now. Electric vehicles are the big thing, but they are up to 50% heavier. That is 50% more material intensive compared to non-electric vehicles. And that goes for e-bikes, e-scooters, e-cars. And the second point, the monocultures, the new technology is battery-driven e-mobility. That batteries are based on the mining of rare earth elements and the availability of electricity, which cannot be guaranteed because we have a competition increasingly with mobility, industry, heat pumps, lighting, and then you have the solar and wind conditions, which are chaotic. So we have to get away from resource-intensive new technologies, and we have to get away from monocultures. We need diversity in technologies.
Yeah. Okay. I want to ask all three of you, maybe even as my last question, although I would really, really love to just sit in a cafe with the three of you and learn everything that you know. But we know, I mean, we even at this level of the obstacles that you're describing that we need to, get away from, we can go back to that point of the behavioral shift, right? That we need to see. And as we can put it, these major rethink exercises to kind of unlearn what we have learned and do it in a different way, because like how we think, our mindsets, our mental models reproduce our choices every time. So my question to all three of you is, what are those major rethink exercises we need to do, and how are we going to achieve that rethinking?
Why don't, Elisa, you start?
Yes, why not?
I'm happy to break the ice on the question. And I'll try to put the 4 ideas that I have on the table, and I'll promise I'll be succinct.
Thank you.
But I think that one of the ideas is around bringing circular economy and the use of resources more centrally into intergovernmental discussion on climate, on biodiversity, on chemicals management. It shouldn't be considered as a separate subject, but really cross-cutting and instrumental to all of them. The second is we really need to rethink the business models around which we operate, the infrastructure around which we operate, and which we designed for a system to be entirely linear. We need to rethink how investment are done, and maybe some of the rethinking that are happening in the context of the recovery, and hopefully a green recovery, can give us an opportunity to do that rethinking. Third one is equal to what Anders was mentioning. Our financial and economic system is supporting currently a linear system, so we need to rethink tax and incentives and make sure that they give us the right signal. And the last one is one that I heard mentioned by the authors, which is around creating the knowledge, the capacity, and the skills for everybody to be comfortable in the circular economy and not being left out or behind in this transformation. So, Lynn, back to you.
That's a very graceful point. Thank you, Elisa. I would love to also hear from the gentleman. What rethink exercises do you want to give us?
I have 3.
Oh, great. Anders, 3.
First of all, what do we measure in society? We measure the wrong things. In the economy as a whole, we have GDP growth, the growth of the production or consumption. That is the main issue. It's a quantitative measure, and in a situation where we need to measure quality and not quantity, this is, of course, flawed. But we have had a debate about that for many, many years, and we are still not really getting there. But there are 5 countries, New Zealand, Iceland, Finland, Wales, and Scotland, who are now trying to take the lead as the well-being alliance economies. And they are trying to focus attention on other objectives, well-being and welfare objectives.
Great.
And the same goes for the circular economy. We measure material flows, but we don't measure the stocks that Walter was talking about. And the stocks are the most important. Secondly, we need to rethink business models. And I'm very attracted. Walter has written a book some years ago called The Performance Economy, where you offer services instead of products. That's a much smarter model, and where the responsibility for the product and the materials rests with the producer. And then you will see a totally different logic, because then it's in the interest of the producer to maintain the value and to capture the value once the product is not used any longer. And thirdly, we have to be more ethical. I mean, the material footprint in my country is 27 tons. In Southern Africa is 2 tons. There is something fundamentally wrong.
Yeah.
And we are screwing poor people of their lives.
Yeah. That's a very important thing to just say it like it is. I agree, Anders. Thank you for that. Walter, can I invite you to give us one last rethink exercise to take home?
I basically would like to underline what the 2 previous speakers have said, and just let me also underline the sufficiency. Today's economy is based on efficiency, but in a performance economy, you make more money with sufficiency solutions by not producing something, but optimizing the use of products. And sufficiency has absolutely no sex appeal in manufacturing. So if we focus on the use of objects and infrastructure and not their production, then sufficiency becomes a key strategy to make money from less resource use for a longer time.
Yeah.
Bravo.
Bravo indeed. Bravo indeed. I want to thank you, all of you, so much. This is, it's not sufficient this time we had. It's not enough, but we're going to have to do with it for now. And yeah, you really enriched our thinking so much. So thank you, all of you, all three of you. Ciao. We've almost come to the end. It went by so fast.
Yeah.
Nice.
Can I ask you, all three of you, just in one sentence, what really stood out from the conversation?
I loved many of the points that the guests brought up. I think for me, around metrics, I mean, that's really a lot of our work with nations.
Yeah.
I think it really just goes to show how difficult it is actually to track circular economy and actually measure it in a way that speaks to the points that they all brought up. So,
yeah.
I mean, that very much resonates with me and reinforces the mission of the Circularity Gap.
The mission and your passion
initiative.
for it, yeah.
Totally.
Thanks, Matt.
Well, I think it's also just exemplary, the discussion we just had in kind of the critical friends, and that we are amongst that. So
Exactly.
I loved kind of some of the critiques, but then always move to a constructive mode, and how do we progress and how do we move forward?
Which
so
is
that's
the most
really
important
what I take away, the really kind of rich suggestions, and I hope that we can join forces in really, yeah, kind of 5 years ahead,
Yeah.
really kind of build on the rich suggestions made.
Yeah, it's the only way, huh? Yeah.
Yes.
Lakshmi?
Yeah, I mean, I loved two things in particular. One was the very practical solutions, or a suggestion like, if we change this, we will get this. For example, changing some tax issues. But lastly, I think what really stood out to me was Anders' final point about the social justice side of things.
Yeah.
And the way a material footprint could be so different in one part of the world, but really be affecting people in the other parts of the world.
Exactly,
so
because the two are connected. It's
completely.
Yeah.
And
we're
that's
extracting from one place and using it in another.
exactly, and putting many countries who consume the least at most danger from the impacts of climate change. And
exactly.
it's a difficult thing to even speak about sometimes, but I think very important to do so.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for giving us that last bit of food for thought. Well, it flew by, but we covered a lot of ground here in the last hour. Some of these facts stated in the report, I truly recommend that you read it. You will, you know, there will be a lot of clear overview in your head after you read it. And of course, the 21 Solutions, the GMATE Nations initiative. And I think, you know, for everyone, there's something here that we discussed. There's, for all of us, this culture of caring, you know, let's care more, let's love more the planet and our fellow living beings on it. Tax nature, make sure that we can actually afford to use the secondary materials that need to be circled back into the economy. The just transition, really use that lens for every decision. Am I doing the ethical thing here? Or am I just benefiting a small part of the world? The investments that Elisa mentioned, the green recovery, the different designs, so not just recycling, but really designing differently. The business models, the measuring, the performance economy. I think there's really something for all of us to take forward here. And I want to end with you, Matthew, just to say, because we're all hopefully fired up here and want to like take it forward, what opportunities for action do you actually have for us?
Yeah, well, I hope we all are fired up. For everybody out there, I think there are kind of three things that you can do. One, get in touch with us for a Circularity Gap report. As I mentioned, it's not only about bringing that data together, but actually building communities of key stakeholders to really interpret that data and bring those recommendations forward to where they need to be. So that's a huge part of our work, and we're working with more and more nations every year. Also with GMATE Nations, I mean, now this is a great platform just to get your country's data online, so you can begin to track and monitor progress year on year. Also, this is a new tool for us. So I think for those interested who really want to co-create those features, work with us in really making the best tool possible, please reach out. All of those options are available at circularity-gap.world.
Thanks, Matt. do it, I would say. There's something for everyone, as I said. We've come to the end of our launch of this report. A lot of insights. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the wonderful crew here at Circle, which we closely collaborated with to make it possible. And no time to waste. Let's do it. See you next year.